And good evening, everybody, and welcome to Going Nuclear, full blown coverage of the land. I am Ethan Greenberg, and alongside of me is my co host, Madison Delaney. We are presented by Buzz Sports CLE. You can follow me on Twitter at egreen4325. You can follow Madison on Twitter at madtravels24. You can follow the show on Twitter at Going Nuclear CLE. Hope everybody is doing well as we return here for the first show of 2023. I'm a little under the weather. Madison, you're a little under the weather. This is just fantastic, right?
Yeah, I think it's the pre or post, I should say, post holiday mix of whatever is floating out there in the ethers, I guess. Everybody seems to be sick, so we'll be struggling through it, but we we have to talk about it. There's too many good things to talk about to skip out on this one.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Apologize, folks, for not being here last week. I made the trip back from the in-laws. We were down in Wilmington, North Carolina. We had a holiday celebrations down there with my wife's family, so that was all good. Madison, how was your Christmas?
It was pretty good. We just stayed around here in North Carolina also. Not at the beach like I was expecting. Didn't get snow like I wanted, but it was frigidly cold. So there was that, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. At least we weren't in the cold of the Christmas Eve game in Cleveland, where the Browns squandered that opportunity against the Saints. We're just going to move on from there. We're going to skip over that one because, quite frankly, that's just more disappointment to add to the overall picture of what has become the Cleveland Browns 2022 season. And then, the first thing I just wanted to touch on here is not necessarily directly Browns related, but just the medical emergency on Monday Night Football between the Bills and the Bengals. Damar Hamlin. Um, did you happen to see the press conference today that they had with the doctors at the University of Cincinnati Health Center?
I did not see it. I did see kind of some highlights and some quotes. I thought it was really cool that he asked who won the game, because no matter what, like they're still hyper competitive people. Like they are people, of course, and I know that's been a big storyline. But the reason that they're in the league is because they are that competitive and they have that drive. So I did think that was interesting and a good sign, I think, for his recovery that he was worried about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I was going to mention that myself, and you're on the same page here without me even saying anything. So that's always good. Yeah, that was fantastic here. Um, it's kind of a relief, maybe a lighthearted moment there where it's like he's so concerned, his health. He's like, what happened in the game? I mean, the guy's barely conscious. He almost, his heart stopped beating a couple times, and this guy's worried about who won the game. Kind of crazy stuff there. And the one, something that came to mind for me. First of all, I was flipping channels when all this happened. I don't know about you, but I'm like, well, this game has no impact on us, and it's going to be a good game, but I got DVR to catch up on. So I flip it back, and I'm like, what is going on? So I had to back up the DVR, and I watched the play. I was like, oh, he got hit in the head, and then I'm like, wait a second, he stood back up, and then he fell back over. What I found, there were a couple things that I found interesting. I don't know about you when you were watching it is just the discussion that was going on and how they covered it. I think they did a pretty fair job of that. I mean, obviously, guys like Joe Buck, Troy Aikman were in a tough spot. Not there,
Yeah.
without they're not getting medical updates per se. There's all these HIPAA laws and so on and so forth. Who knows? Um, and then Scott Van Pelt and Ryan Clark on Sports Center
Yeah.
really did a good job. Lisa Salters on the sideline. I mean, she was in a tough spot. You could tell emotionally it was a charged moment there. And these people, I don't know if you would agree with this, but sports reporters aren't often put in these situations of dealing with the harsh realities of life and death at a moment's notice. Um, it just doesn't happen that way. So this is a different different type of genre that they're having to delve into at a moment's notice. So I think that overall it was covered pretty well. I did find it peculiar when Scott Van Pelt and Ryan Clark were talking, and I heard no mention of the Christian Eriksen situation that occurred during the Euros in the summer of 2021 when he had a cardiac event. I was just surprised that that didn't even get brought up since that happened so recently.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that it would. And it's one of the things I know we were kind of texting back and forth about it. It's like one of the first things that popped to mind, I think, for both of us is how similar it was in terms of, like the getting up and then falling down and like the way he fell and then not moving. And, I think in the Euros, you had a bit more like vision into like what his face looked like, which we fortunately did not get in the NFL game, or at least I didn't see it. I was watching the Cavs, so I had heard about it on Twitter, and I flipped back to kind of listen to coverage on my phone and see what they were saying, if they would have any updates, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's a really tough spot to be in. It's not something that they're terribly accustomed to. Unfortunately, I think like Ryan Clark obviously has been sort of in that situation, not quite the same. But that's why he was so measured and did such a great job because he's got that experience, that he could kind of carry through. And I did think he, in particular, did a great job, kind of just framing the whole situation for everybody. And then Scott Van Pelt, of course, was also great. But yeah, it was a little bit of a tough spot because they didn't know whether they were canceling or not canceling, and there was just a lot of unknown information and trying to fill airtime in some form or fashion. When you may restart the game at some point, it was unclear, so it was just a lot of confusion. I did think they navigated it pretty well.
Yeah, and then you've got on the other end of the spectrum, Skip Bayless. I'm not a huge fan of his. I think he's a loudmouth and he's all about the hot take. I don't know if that's really who he is or not, but and maybe he's gotten where he's gotten because he is so opinionated, and that's what and people seem to take to that. But he came out with a tweet, and initially when I read it, I saw it as part of other people's mentions. And essentially, I think if you read through the whole tweet, it appears he was trying to point out that like everything else was secondary to this person's, to Damar Hamlin's life. And then the next day, Shannon Sharp doesn't appear on the show the day, and then the next day he starts to give his opening monologue, and Skip says, "I'm not taking it down," and like interrupted him. I'm like, yeah, that was kind of crazy. Hey, what was going through your head? I don't know if you read that tweet or saw any of the backlash. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think initially, and maybe it is a little bit like everybody like seeing it in quote tweets and people kind of framing it for you, so to speak. That it seemed pretty negative to me from the beginning. I mean, I think you could see the side where it's like logistically this would be a nightmare, but like also how can you not like cancel the game or postpone the game or whatever is like kind of how I think I took it after. But all that to say, I did not like his Tuesday actions with Shannon Sharp, and that makes me walk back that opinion. Like I was like, okay, well maybe I'll give you a little grace and I'll see that framing of it. But I think after Tuesday, I was like, nah, I don't think I can get behind you, even though I may have seen your point. In the aftermath, not in the immediate aftermath, but the next day or so. So yeah, that was pretty disappointing from him. Not surprising, but disappointing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, lots of crazy stuff, but definitely good news today out of the doctors at University of Cincinnati Health Center there. So that's good stuff, and it appears that they're not going to complete the Bengals and Bills game, and waiting for more details to determine how that's going to impact the playoff seeding. It'll all be interesting. Unfortunately, it's not going to impact the Browns at all because they are eliminated from the playoffs.
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs.
Okay, okay, Jim, I get it. I won't talk about playoffs. All right, again, I'm sorry. Apologize. Um, so yeah, Sunday, New Year's Day, uh, I took my son Jacob. He is 12 years old. We've been to some Browns preseason games at First Energy Stadium. In fact, we saw Miles Garrett's first pro game, preseason game against the New Orleans Saints. Deshaun Kaiser at the helm, getting the win for the Browns. And then we went and we saw a couple of other games. We saw them take on the Eagles, and that was in Baker Mayfield's rookie year. He came out. He didn't start the game. Tyrod Taylor did, and then Mayfield came in, another win. And the next year we saw them with the debut um, with the Freddie Kitchens offense after everyone was so hyped up after Mayfield's rookie season. But this was the first regular season game we got to go to. It wasn't in Cleveland, but being here in Richmond, Virginia, the closest market to us, I do believe, is the Washington Commanders. So we made our way up to FedEx Field, and we talked about this. This was something I was going nuclear about the other week. I was going nuclear about the FU fees on the tickets, and we got tickets in the club level, mostly because I was like, hey, if the weather is crappy, we've got an indoor concourse to go into. But by and large, other than that indoor concourse, FedEx Field is a crap hole. That place is garbage. They've got these seats in the club section, like some of them are just all plastic, right? And then you've got ones that have padding on them, but the padding's all tore up. I'm like, what's up with that? And I was like, this place is just a dump. It is an absolute dump. I was, even in the restrooms, I couldn't figure out if they had mopped the floor or or if there was leakage or what was going on. But I'm like, this is a slipping hazard here. Um, so, it was an interesting experience. I wasn't thoroughly impressed with the stadium. I didn't think they had I don't think they've really updated all like the video boards and everything like that to post stats during the game. And for people who crap on, First Energy Stadium, it's not bad compared to FedEx Field and all that's going on there. Um, and so one thing that I noticed is hilarious to hear all the boos for Carson Wentz. Wow. Immediately after he threw the first interception, I don't know if you got to see the game in its entirety, Madison, but they were immediately chanting for Taylor Heineke.
Yeah.
And it didn't get better as the game went on. Um, and so one of the cool things that we got to do with getting to the stadium early, we got, for a 1 o'clock kickoff, gates open officially at 11, but there's an area behind each end zone which you can get in. You can get into that area. And so we were able to get in that area ultimately at, before 11 o'clock, and they let you get in at 11. We raced around to where the visitors tunnel is, and we went down near the tunnel, right at the front row, and we were able to catch a couple of autographs. So, my son got a football from his cousin for Christmas, and I said, "Oh, you know what we need to do? We need to get some autographs," and hoping that that would be the case, that we might be able to pull that off. So, tried to get some players' attention. There were some other people that were like professional autograph seekers. The dude had like all these like 8 by 11 glossy photos of the dudes trying to get autographs. But anyway, so I saw Bill Callahan, offensive line coach extraordinaire, and I got his attention. He came over and he signed Jacob's football. Because I'm thinking, hey, I don't know if we're going to be able to get anybody else's autograph. I take what I can get, right? So then, sure enough, as they were heading back to the locker room, Deshaun Watson coming down the sideline. People on the field were getting him to sign autographs, and he made his way around, and we got Deshaun Watson's autograph. So here's my question, and this is just me, looking back at it now in hindsight. Did I ruin my son's football by getting Deshaun Watson autograph? And did I B, from the perspective of having autographed, I guess, by Bill Callahan, and then B, did I get it? Was it a bad idea to get Deshaun Watson's autograph? Your thoughts?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, hopefully he kind of redeems himself on some level and, does the work and gets back in the good graces of the public. And until that time, autographs are generally pretty messy, so you can pretend it's somebody else. But no, and I wouldn't say Bill Callahan autographing it devalues it because he's a legend. So I would say, if anything, it ups the value.
All right. That's a win for me. That's a win. I could feel a little bit better as a father there that I, didn't do anything wrong there. All right. So let's talk. I think, I was going to talk Browns kind of, just had them listed here first, but I think that you touched on it when you were talking about what was going on Monday night, and the fact that you were watching the Cavs game at the time that all this was going down on Monday Night Football. So I think it would be only appropriate to kind of to touch upon the Cavs game. I unfortunately was not at that moment able to watch the game. I was simply following it along and seeing how badly the Cavs played in the first half. But it turned out to be one hell of a historic game. Donovan Mitchell, for once, Cleveland team pulled a game from a victory from the jaws of defeat to defeat the Bulls 145-134 in overtime, and Garland with 71 Mitchell with 71 points. No Darius Garland, no Evan Mobley that night, and Mitchell also had 11 assists, 8 rebounds, so 2 rebounds short of a triple-double. Trailed by 18.5. Kevin Love put up 12 points, 17 boards in the starting lineup. Allen with 21 and 8, and Cedi Osman off the bench with 19. What were your impressions as you're watching this game? I mean, I'd say you are, you definitely are able to watch more games than I've been able to. Where did this one fit into the general scheme of things for how the Cavs have played all season?
Yeah, I mean, I think thoughts right off the bat is this is maybe second to LeBron scoring whatever it was, 24 in a row, in the playoffs early in his career. Maybe second to that just because it was playoffs, so you have to give him that weight. But greatest individual performance I've ever seen. I ordered the Cavs did the commemorative shirt with the picture with the 71. I ordered it because you had to. It was just so great. And it was tough timing given, what else happened on Monday. But, I'm watching it and I'm just there's just no way this is happening. But every time he'd hit a shot, you're we're not going to lose this game, are we? He's going to find a way. And I mean, it was just crazy to watch. You're just watching it with your mouth open the whole time. What is happening here? Okay, well, maybe we have a chance. Oh, we do have a chance. Oh, we're losing this game. But I think they hit a 3 towards the end, and I was well, maybe that's the nail in the coffin. But we came back, and he made a hell of a play off the line. And I think he specifically called out one earlier in the season where they did not get that, and that he's worked on it, which is what you want to hear. So I mean, I think his leadership really stood out in that game, aside from scoring 71. He was, as, any good leader is, I guess, but he's quick to give credit to everybody else, which you all like to see. And he specifically called out hustle plays, which did make the game ultimately, because he doesn't score the points without some of those plays. So it was good of him to acknowledge it. But it was a fun one. It was one of the most fun Cavs games that I can remember.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I fortunately at the end when it got close, it came on NBA TV, so I was able to see the end of the game, including the free throw that the intentional miss and the putback by Mitchell, which in the days following the last 2 minutes report came out and said, nope, that was a lane violation. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, I guess for once we didn't have that go against us, so I'll take that. I mean, I'm like, well, it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes you win some, you lose some. It's crazy that it wasn't maybe in real time it was closer than it looked on replay, but there was a lot going on there, and so uh, I think if you're a Bulls fan, you might say, "Look, we needed to make other plays throughout the game. It shouldn't have come down to that." I think, which is what Cleveland fans are used to saying, as we normally come out on the short end of the stick in situations such as that. But that was just a heck of an effort for Donovan Mitchell to go for 71 points to set the all-time game high scoring record for the Cavs, breaking LeBron's record and then surpassing Kyrie, etc. Funny that he was playing. What was he playing? Call of Duty earlier in the day
Yeah.
with Kyrie.
Yeah, that was an interesting antidote when I think Kyrie mentioned it.
Yeah, and it's funny that how these athletes these days are much closer than, and maybe it's just the communication and the ability to have the instantaneous contact with somebody that they didn't have back in the 80s and the 90s, other than picking up your landline to call somebody. There was no internet. There were no cell phones, so it was a different time. But that was a heck of a performance. The Cavs desperately, uh, you know, they've got to keep winning because these other teams, we talked about it, they're not going away. Brooklyn lost last night, finally, to the Bulls, and Milwaukee, they're playing real tough, and the Boston Celtics are tough, and so are the Sixers. So that top five is all going to be that's going to be one heck of a race as we swing into the spring and head toward the end of the season. Hopefully, the Cavs continue to be in that mix and can stay out of the play-in. B, it would be nice to be able to host a playoff series. Last night, so coming off of the high of that 71-point performance for Mitchell on Monday night, they had to come back and play the Suns. Thankfully, I guess the Suns were without, not I guess, they were without Devin Booker. And that obviously hurt. All five of their starters did end up in double figures last night, with Chris Paul leading the way. He had 25, and then DeAndre Ayton with 15, and Landry Shamet with 14. And the Cavs really, I mean, I didn't even notice this until just this moment. I mean, the only other starter, because there was no Garland again, but the only other starter in double figures was Karis LeVert. He is just an up and down player, and I don't know what to make of him. I don't know that I can count on him on a night in, night out basis to put up the numbers and have a strong stat line. Do you leave him? I think under normal circumstances, he's not going to be in your starting five. He needs to be coming off the bench, but sheesh, I just don't know what to think of that guy and how it's going to translate going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the role of role players, right? Is, occasionally they'll pop for, a big game or two. And that's, I think, where he kind of fits in. I know we gave up a lot for him, so maybe we're expecting a little bit more from him, given, the trade and, the first round picks. But overall, I think he's giving you stuff that I wasn't expecting the effort on the defensive end. I think he's been really solid there. He's been a much better playmaker, I think, than I expected him to be. He was a lot more ISO, I feel like, towards the back half of last year once we traded for him, which doesn't really jive with the vibe that we have. But I think this year he's done a much better job. So I personally like to keep him. But it might be contingent on him finding that that same level that he gets to sometimes when he starts off the bench, because somebody's got to be that guy. And it'll be interesting maybe like when Ricky Rubio comes back, because he's never really had a chance to play with Ricky. And I wonder if Ricky will be able to set him up a little bit easier so he's not, necessarily like on the ball with that second unit. It'll be kind of an interesting thing to watch as Ricky comes back.
Yeah, absolutely. And Evan Mobley returned to the lineup from injury last night, and he had a very quiet 32 minutes, but thankfully he stepped up and he made the open look to give the game-winning bucket for the 90-88 victory on the dish from from I keep getting the two mixed up. I don't know how I could, but on the dish from Mitchell. I watched Tim Legler, I think, was diagramming it this morning on SportsCenter and was showing how there were 4 defenders coming at Mitchell, and he made the play. It was a tough pass, but found Mobley on the move, and Mobley pulled up for just inside the foul stripe, and boom, there you go.
It was a great cut. It was a great cut.
It was, and don't want to overlook the effort. I was listening to Tim Alcorn and Jim Chones on the radio last night. And sometimes they're entertaining, other times not. They were having a ball talking about Raul Neto off the bench coming in 14 points and how he was under the skin of Chris Paul. And I'll take it all day long. You got to have guys like that. I mean, Cleveland loves those types of guys, like a Matthew Dellavedova type player like that comes in off the bench and scraps whenever they get in. So that was impressive there. And then to have Jetty plus 11, he goes for 12 points. So anytime you can get that, you will take it. I think this team's got, obviously when Garland is out there, along with the rest of the starting 5, and then you get back Dean Wade. We're going to get Ricky Rubio. It will be interesting to see how this all comes together going down the stretch, and once we get past the midway point of the season. I was just reading a little earlier, they were talking about a potential interest in Bojan Bogdanovic, but that from the Pistons, averaging over 20 points a game, but that their asking price might be too steep. I know obviously they've got to rebuild. They need a complete rebuild. I think you got to look to a team that has high priced talent, that they are looking to clear the books and pick up the draft capital. I know that the Stepien rule could come into play and make it impossible for the Cavs to be able to give up additional first round draft picks, but we shall see what happens there. You and I were commenting last Thursday, when the Cavs were playing the Pacers, and that was just painful. The Pacers hitting as many, I think I read they hit 11 threes that night. And it just seemed like every time you turn, I'm like, how are we losing these guys? I guess the Pacers are better than I'm thinking, but it just always feels like the defense is letting other teams that are lesser than them get hot from outside, and then we can't stop them. And I liked your thoughts on that, and if you want to share those, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think what I maybe mentioned is that they're a lot like the Cavs last year, where they're kind of young and scrappy, and you're not necessarily like looking like same thing we kind of got mad about last year is like Giannis eating his chicken after whatever it was that he was eating after the game, like they come to play because, they haven't been there and we got to, maybe be prepared for that next time. It's like that kind of attitude that we're starting to give because we, have been up at the top for a bit now in this season. And I think sometimes they don't always lock in the same way. And especially that like a team that's young and hungry and hasn't really done anything yet, they're trying to make a name for themselves like Indiana is. And I do think they are. I mean, they had a bunch of guys that got traded there that it was like, okay, you can go like end your career there. And it's kind of like, like, oh, okay, well, if that's the case, then I'll just go ahead and revive my career here. And like, that's kind of the attitude they're taking. So it's interesting. I mean, I think they're not someone I would want to see in the playoffs. That's for sure. That's for sure. I don't want that matchup. Don't like that matchup. Would like to avoid it if we can. They'll be a tough out for some if they end up making it. I think they might be in the play-in right now. I don't think they're in that last spot, if I can remember, but they're close, I think.
Well, taking a look actually at the current standings, I just pulled it up. Right now, uh, let's see, Miami. Well, I guess the 4 play-in teams. Indiana would be 7, Miami 8, Atlanta 9, Chicago 10. So we would not we would have a tough matchup. We'd be up against the Sixers, and that is not going to be any kind of an easy task. Um, I don't know. The East is very tough this year. It's looking better than the Western Conference, but because we don't get to see those games as much, it's hard to say what's really
Yeah.
going on. I mean, you do see a lot of the LA Lakers, but I mean, they're really a non-factor. So we got that
Yeah.
going for us. So moving over to to the Brown. Well, now actually I should say the Cavs, they go now on a 5-game road trip over a 10-day period. They got to go we're going to get a chance to see some of the Western Conference teams. They're going at Denver, then they take on Phoenix. They're at Utah, at Portland, at Minnesota. And Portland is above 500. Minnesota just a few games under 500. They gave us a tough battle here. I mean, we've played both of those teams, I believe, already this season. Uh, in Cleveland, they're going to be tough. We played Utah at home, Phoenix. I don't believe we have played Denver yet, and they are currently sitting tied atop the Western Conference. So another challenge, more tests for the Cavs to pass here in the early season. Folks, before we shift topics here, just once again wanted to reiterate we are presented by Buzz Sports CLE. You can follow me on Twitter at egreen4325. You can follow Madison on Twitter at madtravels24. Follow the show on Twitter at Going nuCLEar CLE. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share with your friends. Send us your comments. Jump in. On the conversation here. And coming up here in a few minutes before the end of the show, we will have a special announcement about next week's show, the day, the time, and a special guest who will be joining us for next week's program. So, turning back to the fun of the Browns, as they have just one game left in the regular season, they will be taking on the Steelers this Sunday. They took on the Commanders last Sunday, and they took advantage of the opportunities given to them by Carson Wentz. The turnovers in the first half kept us in the game. Our defense did what they needed to do. However, giving up a 21 play, 11 plus minute drive in the second quarter, that's a bit deflating. So instead of, we're holding on to this 3-0 lead, and then we're down 7-3 and headed into the locker room. Washington gets the ball first. And I mean, I was sitting around in the section I was sitting in. There were other Browns fans, and we were all scratching our heads as Kevin Stefanski pulled a stupid Fansky, in my opinion, took 3 points off the board. That Cade York had made a field goal to make it 6-0. There was an offsides call, so it advanced the ball to the half the distance to the 3-yard line. We're not talking the 1 or even the 2. We're talking the 3-yard line. And you took points off the board in a game you were controlling. So instead of being up 6-0, I know that's not a full touchdown, but instead of being up 6-0 and firmly in control, now you risk only being up 3-0 and giving the ball, giving some life, breathing some life into Washington. And sure enough, Kevin Stupid Fansky with the analytics call is basically saying that 0 is greater than 3 under their analysis of the situation. And Watson ends up getting stopped short at the 1-yard line, and so on and so forth. The Browns won the game. Hey, so we got to be happy about that. But you look back at it and you kind of question that. And I don't know about you, Madison, but I noticed and all season long, it's so predictable now. Comes to third down, Where's Nick Chubb? Oh, he's nowhere to be found. He's on the sideline. Here comes Kareem Hunt. You're like, here comes the screenplay. You just feel like they've gotten into this routine and nobody has to really prepare. They're like, yeah, all right, we know what's coming. We're ready for this. And that to me says they're not making adjustments.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if anything, this game in particular showed them making game adjustments. Just the like stark difference between the first and the second half. Although to be fair, I mean, I think it has been a problem kind of like all season long. But I do think in this game in particular that they did go in at halftime and figure it out really on both sides of the ball. Just because of the long drive they gave up before. I mean, obviously they had the 2 picks, I think, in the first half, which are great. But to give up the long drive, I was pretty worried that they were going to come out and do the double dip and come out and score pretty easily. And they did pretty well. They stood about, so that was good. And offensively, we obviously got it going. So that was nice. I don't know enough about like the logistics to know if we really did make adjustments on the offensive side or if it just all of a sudden clicked timing wise. But it obviously something changed, whether it was just, the timing or the play calling or what have you.
Right. Well, first of all, the number of opportunities on offense in the first half obviously is limited when the other team controls the ball for an 11-minute drive. That's virtually an entire quarter. So there was very few opportunities to get into a rhythm offensively, but it looked like from the outset they were doing some nice things in the running game, and they really weren't finding much going on in the passing game. I'll say, I mean, in the second half, it was great. There were some good throws by Watson, great effort by the receivers, specifically Amari Cooper. I don't know if you saw this. He is on track with just a decent day. Doesn't even need like 100 yards, like 80 some yards on Sunday. Yes. Barking is good. But needs 80 some yards for his to set a new season high for himself. That's pretty impressive, considering what he's gone through this season, having Jacoby Brissett start all those games, the uncertainty, and so on and so forth. I mean, that says a lot there, and I think that points to some potential. I think that there's still some, questions that have to be answered in the offseason. It will be very interesting to see how they address all of this. But yeah, it was good to see all that in the second half. It was nice to see Watson go right back to DPJ after he dropped the pass in the red zone to go right back to him for the touchdown. I was looking at the guy next to me, and we were talking about, I was like, I don't think just before that possession, I'm like, I don't think he's even targeted DPJ. Sure enough, boom, there's a target to him, and he drops the daggone ball. And then he went back to him. And after the game, he talked about that as kind of being um, the most impressive of the 3 touchdown passes that he threw, because it was something that they saw, maybe they had practiced for it, they were prepared for it, and knew what the look was going to be, and did and executed. So that's good to hear. But I mean, it was a relatively I'm trying to think of the pedestrian statistics. 9 of 18, 169 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. I mean, I'll take it all day long. Get us a win is a win.
Yeah.
I don't and 3 touchdowns to no interceptions, fine. That's perfectly fine. I mean, you can't. What are you supposed to do if all of your, you could, let's say you had 3 75-yard touchdown, completions. Those are the only 3 completions you had all day, and you only threw it 6 times. Are you going to be upset with the stats because, oh, you only had 3 completions? Well, there were 3 75-yard touchdowns. I mean, come on now. So that was good. Saw Jerome Ford in the backfield. That may be a preview of things to come next season, because I'm thinking that Kareem Hunt is not going to be back, barring some kind of a major concession on his part. And I don't know if he's got the burst that he had even a couple years ago in the run game.
Yeah, I don't know if you even at a cheaper price necessarily want to keep him. I mean, he is not. I mean, and it could be the line, possibly, but I mean, he has not been good down the stretch this year. I mean, he started off okay, like maybe he's got some injuries that we aren't really privy to, that maybe are lingering a bit, and not keeping him from playing necessarily, but maybe kind of affecting that burst a bit. But yeah, he's not quite been the same. Gus agrees. But yeah, I mean, the running back room is such an interesting one. We have plenty of running backs, and obviously they've drafted forward with kind of the precursor that he would be that replacement. And then you also have Dearness, and maybe you want to try to keep him. We haven't used him really at all, and part of his role last year was filling in for injured guys. So I guess it's a good thing that we haven't seen him much. Maybe it impacts his ability to sign elsewhere because other teams won't necessarily know if he's still got it or doesn't, that kind of deal. Maybe you can get him for cheap. Maybe he's really the second back that you're thinking. I mean, he's been great for Cleveland in the past. And the fact that we haven't seen Ford until like this game, I think concerns me a bit because I would have thought we would have gone to him a little bit earlier, at least for like a touch or two a game, like let's just see what he looks like back there. We really haven't done that at all. So I worry a bit that, we're maybe not as high on him as we originally were. Although I think he's been pretty good in kick returns. So I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah,
Fun room to watch in the off season.
absolutely. I was listening to the Really Big Show this morning, and they were talking about the guys that could be leaving, or not re-signed, leaving free agency, etc. And they talked about Dearness as one who would probably not be back next year, but we shall see. One guy that's going to be back here next year is Myles Garrett. In the game, he had 8 tackles and 1.5 sacks. That was big. Grant Delpit suddenly playing pretty well, and he took advantage of Carson Wentz's poor play. He got 7 tackles, 2 interceptions, and I think it was on his second interception in the end zone. We really benefited from an official's no call because it looked like they bumped the receiver off on the route, and it should have been pass interference, 1st and goal from the 1, but they didn't get the call. We get the pick, and that was essentially the ball game right there. Um, so the Browns, with the win, they improved to 7-9, and now it's really a chance to play spoiler here, even though um, the Browns game against the Steelers will not, if the Steelers could win the game on Sunday and still not make the playoffs. But if the Browns can defeat the Steelers, that would officially eliminate them from contention. It won't matter what the other teams do, and it's a bigger picture than that. This would be the first time since 1988 that the Browns, if they win on Sunday, would sweep a season series from the Steelers. We're talking back to the Bernie Kosar days in the mid late '80s and stuff, and those were fantastic times. Also, it would give Mike Tomlin his first ever team to finish under 500 for the first time under him as head coach. I mean, he's done a fantastic job there with all kinds of chaos in the quarterback room. Starting with Mitch Trubisky and trying to develop Kenny Pickett. And Kenny Pickett's I heard them read the statistic, amazingly enough, and maybe it's just circumstances, but he's had 3 game-winning drives already this season. That's pretty impressive. But we shall see. They've had improved offensive line play that was so brutal over the past couple of seasons when Ben Roethlisberger was just a sitting duck back there. So we shall see what comes of that. And it'll be interesting also because the starting quarterbacks in the 29-17 Week 3 win for the Browns, it was Brissett for the Browns. It was Trubisky for the Steelers. TJ Watt did not play. And actually, I noted that the 12-point margin of victory was maybe looked a little bit bigger than the game actually was. It was only because of a late fumble recovery by Denzel Ward in the end zone. that we ultimately ended up with the 12-point win in the game. Hey, on the positive side, Chubb rushed for 113 yards and a touchdown. Cooper had 101 yards on 7 receptions with a touchdown, and Njoku with 89 yards, 9 receptions, and a touchdown. But again, you insert TJ Watt into the equation, and that is going to make a huge difference for the Steelers defense. Although I saw some injury reports, including Minka Fitzpatrick. So I don't know. We'll wait and see when we get a little bit closer to the game what happens there. Something that I saw, which this is gonna be fun. And actually, I think this is a good time to announce, to announce the schedule change for next week and the guest. So next week, due to another fantastic last minute being made aware of band concert for my son, we are going to move the show to Monday night, 8 o'clock start time. We will be here. And that'll be an interesting day because normally they refer to Monday after that last Sunday of the NFL season as Black Monday. And you see coaches get fired. I think we've talked about this ad nauseum. Don't think that Stefanski's going anywhere. I think he's done enough to keep his job. They're going to give him at least one full season with Watson. Excuse me. So you got that. But interestingly, I saw some quotes in the media today from the pressers with the coordinators. So Joe Woods has been on the hot seat all season long. Despite the team playing a little bit better here down the stretch, there's still question. You go, well, you did this last year too. What was different about this year that you couldn't continue that against the lesser talent of the league in the early part of the season? What's the deal with that? So Joe Woods talking, this is crazy. And I don't know if you saw this quote or not, but I want your thought on it. The quote was, they said if there was anything he'd change about the way he's led the defense. No, not really. I think you have to work through issues. There are some things I'm not doing pressure-wise that I'd like to do. It's a learning process. There's nothing I go back and regret. When you hear that and you see the results of, how things have played out this season, is that kind of a shocking statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think it feels a little bit like finger pointing to me. Like he's like, oh, there's things I would like to do that we can't do because, I don't think it's a secret that like things were too complicated at the beginning of the year and like the defense didn't know what we were in because of those complications, and it was hard for them to like understand what coverage they were in and where they were supposed to be and their spots and that sort of thing. It feels like, well, they couldn't get the concepts down, and so for that reason we've had to dumb it down. But like, okay, if that's the case and it's working, why would we overcomplicate it in the beginning? So I don't love that quote. I don't know. He had a couple things. I saw a couple things that I was like, I don't love that from you. It's an interesting hello. And yeah, Monday we might have some news. We'll see.
Yeah, we will. Another quote. They were talking to him about the defense, the run game. He says, everyone knows we struggled with the run game this year. I feel like our guys in the secondary, communication has gotten better through the season. That's why we're playing better from a pass standpoint. Run game, we've just got to get better. If I hear one more person talk about how they've got to get better, I'm gonna lose my lunch. Okay?
Yeah.
That is the most played out quote from probably this NFL season and last NFL season, along with they play their tails off. We play our tails off. I'm sick of hearing this. Okay. Don't just sit there and give me this lip service. Let's see you do something out there. But yeah, talking about, well, I feel like guys in the secondary communication has gotten better. Well, like you just said, Madison, if you're putting out concepts that are ridiculously overcomplicated and not using the skill set of your players, you're not a good coach. You're not a good manager of your talent. That's a problem. And who's calling now? Maybe, and you know, I don't know who's calling the shots on this stuff. Is somebody else telling him what to do? Is he the one? The big discussion I've heard is, was he all in on the Browns and the type of linebackers they brought in, the smaller, quicker guys? Was he all in on the lack of attention and focus to bring in some run stuffers, on the interior D line? It There are so many questions I would love to ask this guy, and I don't know that he'd be able to get all the answers, but wow, I would love to be a fly on the wall in that building.
He might. He could follow the path of Hugh and just do a tell-all. They might not
Yeah,
be true statements, but he could say it.
absolutely, absolutely. And then I just thought I'd throw this out there. The special teams coordinator, the other guy who's kind of on the hot seat, Mike Prefer, on his future here. This is a good one. I like this one. I love it here. I'm under contract. I don't plan on going anywhere else. I'm from Cleveland. I want to help Cleveland win a world championship. That's why I'm here, and that's my focus. Well, I love the part. I guess the part that I like. I love it. I'm under contract. I don't plan on going anywhere else. Just because you're under contract doesn't mean your job is safe, buddy boy. So we shall see that. And just before we started, we talked about the Jadeveon Clowney thing. Jadeveon Clowney coming out and essentially saying it's 95% sure he will not be back next season to bookend with Myles Garrett. And that creates an interesting situation. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But if he doesn't come back, you've got to fill that void. You got to have another number one pass rusher, 1A to Myles Garrett. Otherwise, Garrett's just going to get double teamed, triple teamed, whatever teamed, and he's going to be completely neutralized if they don't fill the void of losing a Jadeveon Clowney. And if he's got beef with the coaches, I wonder which coach it is that he's got beef with. Is it Woods? Is it Stefanski? Is it Andrew Berry? Who's he got beef with?
Yeah, I mean, it could be anybody at this point. There were interesting comments. I haven't really had a chance to look all the way through them yet because it happened right before I think we came on. But yeah, it's quite possible. I think the more I think about it, that it's just kind of a leverage play. Like that's kind of always been his style. And like maybe he's trying to like put into the atmosphere like, hey, I'm more likely not to come back. So if you want me to come back, you better blow me away with an offer kind of deal. It'll be interesting what he could command on the market. I don't really know what his value would be. I mean, he had a good year, not great year. He still didn't stay healthy good part of the year. And I don't know what his sack numbers are off the top of my head, but it'll be interesting to see if he could get the money he wants elsewhere, or if he's really just trying to kind of force Cleveland's hand and Andrew Berry to kind of, put the money where, their mouth is if they want a line that's going to be solid.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a very tough thing to balance, although there should be plenty of money to go around with the new deal that they came to for the Sunday ticket with YouTube TV. And so with us being on what's known as Black Monday, we are going to have a special guest. People who are Cleveland sports fans might be aware of this person, this social media figure on Twitter. Her name, she goes by at Yvette M. LaBoy. She has a podcast on YouTube called Bougie Sports, and she's a Cleveland fan. She's a big time Browns fan. She's also a bit of a fantasy football guru. So we'll get her takes on everything that's happened and transpired from Sunday and the Browns season in general. And possibly, we'll talk about her podcast, get some information about that, and also take a look at what she feels and her thoughts on the impact of legalized sports gambling, not around the country. And it's just become legal as of January 1st in Ohio, and what that does for the future of fantasy sports. You know, touching briefly upon it because it is what it is, and we try and touch on these things. Obviously, Ohio State on New Year's Eve, they go down to Georgia in the Peach Bowl. They fall 42-41. Missed 50-yard field goal attempt by Noah Ruggles, just wide left. It was literally as the clock was striking midnight. I think that my opinion, and they've got recruiting classes, so we'll see. Defense is still a problem. Defense is still a problem, and they got to work on that. And they've got some big shoes to fill at quarterback. I know they've got they've got a lot of prospects, but um, I'm amazed at how these college programs that are consistently at the top are able to interchange the signal caller, and still be able to get results. But I liked what I saw from CJ Stroud, the fact that he was willing to use his legs as well as his arm. I mean, 23 of 34, 348 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks, and he rushed it 12 times for 34 yards against a vaunted Georgia defense. I mean, that was a great effort there. And to do it without Trevion Henderson, Mine Williams was in briefly, ran it 3 times for 8 yards. He has said he is coming back next season, so that is helpful. Jackson Smith and Jigba was gone most of the season anyway. He opted out. Cade Stover gets injured in the first half, and then Marvin Harrison gets knocked out on what could have been a targeting call late in the third quarter. But they need to work on the defense there. That's definitely something that needs to be a focus for the Buckeyes. And folks, when you're done watching us, tune into FS1, the men's basketball. Ohio State Buckeyes, 24th in the country, taking on, while currently they will not be there next week, number 1 Purdue, as they just lost to Rutgers. So you'll have to check that out.
I think they're favored, right? Ohio State's favored, or they were earlier.
Yeah, I'd have to take a look. I got to start getting into the sports gambling thing, or maybe I don't. I don't know if that would be good for my blood pressure.
Maybe, but yeah.
Yeah, I will have to check that out. So just real quick here, I was thinking about games and how they come in different sports. You end up with different types of ways to end a game. Via overtimes, et cetera, or if there's a draw or whatever it is. So I wanted to do a little yay or oy vey about the different types of endings that we have in some of our professional and collegiate sports. So I'll start with NFL overtime rules, regular season / playoffs. Are you okay with that? Is that a yay or an oy vey as to how they have changed and tweaked the overtime rules in the NFL to potentially allow each team to have a possession? It's no longer sudden death. What do you say?
I am a yay compared to what the rules used to be, but an oy vey overall. Like in the grand scheme of overtime rules, not my favorite. I don't really love it. It's not as exciting. You can still, like teams clam up and get super conservative, and then you just punt the ball for the entire overtime. So, I don't love that. You get ties, all that kind of thing. So, not my favorite, but I do think they've improved, but they could still get better.
Okay, you're going to go with you got room for improvement there. I am going to go, I'm going to say yay on the current overtime rules to the extent that they have improved them. I'm going to echo your sentiment. And I'm also going, the next one I want to bring up, I'm going to give a yay to the overtime rules compared to college. So your take on college football overtime rules, which now after the third possession, or starting with the third possession, all you're doing is going back and forth on 2-point conversion plays. A new twist.
Yeah, I'm a big yay because I think it's way more exciting to watch because you're put in a position where you have to pull out the best thing that you have, best thing in your playbook. So it's more interesting and there's more back and forth, I think. I like college rules much better than the NFL rules personally. So yay
okay.
For me.
Yeah, fair enough. I have never been a huge fan of the overtime rules. Let me throw this out there. Do you think it's kind of crappy that they used to add the statistics from the overtimes, the multiple overtimes to your overall stats of touchdowns and this, that, and the other? I'm like, really? We're gonna count this nonsense into your overall stats. I think not. I
That's
think
fair.
not. So I was never a fan of that. All right, let's talk about the NHL hockey. Sudden, I know they've changed rules have changed, over time during the regular season, but in the playoffs, sudden death hockey in the playoffs, yay or oy vey?
I am a yay again because I think it makes it more exciting. Like you're really on the edge of your seat, like waiting for the goal to happen. So I go yay.
All right, I'm gonna go yay on that as well. Oh my God, the NHL playoffs are fantastic. I know I don't know for you down there in Carolina if you've gotten into the Hurricanes at all. Um, but it is exciting, really exciting to see something in person. And when you've got a dog in the fight, for sure, it really is edge on your seat, edge of the
Yeah.
seat excitement there. Um, Soccer penalty shootouts, such as in the World Cup, you play 90 minutes of regular time, you play 30 minutes of extra time, which is not sudden death, and then you go to the penalty shootout. Um, where do you stand on that?
I feel like I would get exiled. I just got an email about a soccer league that might be starting up right before this, and I feel like I might get exiled for saying yay. But like, I love PK shootouts. Like, I hate to be in them, but I love watching them, and I get they're like super high stress. Not necessarily like the best way to determine who like the best team was. I do get that. I fully understand, but they're really exciting to watch, and I love like the trash talk that goes back and forth between the keeper and the kicker. So I will say yay.
All right, I have a tough time with this. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I guess I feel like having watched England in so many competitions in my lifetime and watching various other things that have come down to penalty kicks, I feel like more times than not, the team I've been cheering for has ended up on the short end of the stick. So it is what it is. You got so I'm gonna, but in general, I would go yay. All right, and this one, the Elam ending introduced in the basketball tournament, the Elam ending.
Um, I will go yay if not in place of like the regular game, but like I'm all for like adding fun caveats like in the tournament or like Athletes Unlimited's doing like their like kind of fantasy style point scoring, which I think is really interesting. So I'm all for doing things like that that can maybe help move the game along in some form or fashion. But as a basketball player and coach, I'm a purist. And it takes the full game. You don't just get to start on third base, as someone likes to say. Um, but yeah, I say yay if not in place. Otherwise, oy vey.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yay because I kind of like that in overtime. It's not a situation where you can get a lead and then just sit on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's in the fourth, it's the end of the game. I mean, so there's going to be a winner, et cetera. I kind of like that. I'm like, you're like, all right, this is what we got to get to. We got to keep playing until we get to that. We can't just sit here and hunker down. Let's keep going. Let's do it. So I'm gonna go yay on the Elam ending. Thought it was for its time, which is still current. It's very inventive. So now it is time, as we both are fighting with our colds here, to to come to the end of our show, and we will go nuclear. And Madison, you're up first.
Yeah, I have an interesting storyline that kind of, gave birth to this thought and this idea for my going nuclear. I don't know if you saw or if you follow U.S. men's soccer and all the drama with Gio Reyna and Greg Berhalter. To give the quickest of backstories, effectively he got benched. Was told he would be benched before the World Cup, even though he's a pretty talented player. Did not take it very well. Kind of loafed around in practice, had a bad attitude. Ultimately, I think the team forgave him. Greg Berhalter put that out into the public knowledge, I guess, at a conference after the World Cup. Gio's family didn't like that, so they came out with a big assault story, from 31 years ago of Greg Berhalter with his now wife. and decided to threaten him with that. So moral of the story being, and my going nuclear thing is like, parents, do not get involved with your kids' stuff. Like, no matter what, they need to learn to handle that on their own, no matter how old they are. But especially, he's 20 years old. He's a full-fledged adult. He's playing in Europe, making millions of dollars. Like, he needs to handle his own business. If he's upset about his playing time, it's not up to you to find the dirt on somebody. Like, they probably just ruined his whole career. And the first thing that you think of is like, oh, this is like a, 10U, 12U, 13U, stuff that happens in whatever sport that you choose, basketball, soccer, football, whatever. So just don't learn to, or teach them to fight their own battles and have the hard conversations if they're not happy with playing time, or insert whatever you want. Take the sports metaphor out. Just don't get involved. Just help them help themselves, and that's all you can do. Otherwise, you're going to make it worse. And this made it so much worse.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great point. I am right on with that. You can't be coddling your kids. You got to let them fight their own battles here. That was messed up. That's real messed up here. And that's not going to look very good for Gio. But, Saturday night, over the holiday weekend here, so New Year's Eve. First of all, I decided, okay, what are we going to do? We got the football game at 8:00. Ohio State and Georgia. So decided, all right, I'm going to smoke a brisket all day. Now, in the past, had some timing issues, and it's not getting done. And next thing you know, it's like 8:00, and I'm eating dinner. So we're cooking this beautiful brisket, and Jacob has been fighting, my son has been fighting this cold, since we were down in Wilmington. And now he's starting to get tension headaches. I didn't even know if we were going to make it to the game on Sunday. I'm sitting here freaking out. I don't know what's going to happen. Ultimately, no sooner does the brisket get done than a decision had to be made. I had to take him over to patient first. Okay. So I could be going nuclear just on the fact that my kids ruined my dinner. Not really, because it turned out delicious, and my wife was so kind as to wait until we got home to eat all together, and it turned out fine. So, that's an overreaction to my part. But come on, man. What I'm going nuclear about is the doctor we saw. The dude we saw, I might be like bleeding, bleeding to death. I would not go and see this guy because first of all, he's mumbling. Second of all, he's a low talker. Third of all, he's got a foreign accent, and the icing on the freaking cake, he's wearing a mask, which you should expect in a medical office at this point in time. But you're a mumbler, a low talker, and you have an accent. He comes in, he starts talking. I said, "What? What did you say? Can you repeat that?" I could not understand what this guy was saying. And I'm basically having to repeat everything. He's asking my son questions. My son can't answer the questions because he doesn't know what he's saying. I'm like, all right, this is not the profession for you. All right, buddy, you might know what you're doing and be very, very intelligent, and way more intelligent than I am to know all the medical stuff. But are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? How is a person supposed to get proper care when the person who's treating them is asking them questions and trying to get pertinent and substantial information back and can't get that response because the person doesn't know what they've been asked? So that has me going nuclear. All right. You got all those strikes to get you. Strike 3, 4, mumble, low talker, accent, and a mask. You struck out, buddy. You lose. Do not pass go. Go directly to jail. Yeah, I'm not down with that. So, yeah, big fun. That's what's got me going nuclear this week. So, folks, as mentioned earlier, next week's show, a special Monday edition, Monday 8:00. We will join you live, and we will have a guest. We will have from a Twitter and media, social media. I can't even think of the right word here. figure, a social media figure in a Cleveland sports, realm, at Yvette M. LeBoy from the Bougie Sports podcast on YouTube. We will have her on, and we will get some great insights on what happened over the weekend with the Browns and the Cavs as they start their 5-game road trip. Madison, want to wish you well. Hope you feel better. Hopefully. Hey, Ethan, hope you feel better. Yeah, okay. I hope I feel better
Yeah,
too.
you too. It goes both ways. Unfortunately, we're both sick. But
Exactly. So once again, folks, thank you for tuning in. We are presented by Buzz Sports CLE. You can follow me on Twitter at egreen4325. You can follow Madison on Twitter at madtravels24 and follow the show on Twitter at Going nuCLEar CLE. Once again, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you to Craig Fountain for allowing us to be on. Appreciate that. And we will talk to you on Monday. And that's going to do it for tonight's show. You've been listening to Going nuCLEar CLE, full-blown coverage of the land.